Ek was so bang dat die kakies my sal vang en ver oor die see wegsneer. Toe vlug ek na die kant van die Oppingtonse sand, daaronder by die groot rivier. O, bring my terug na die ou Transvaal.
Carbineers at the ready. Morning, Carbineers. It's Cherry Carter reporting in. I've been away. I went to Boer. I went to Renmark. Hang on. I went to Mildura, spent a night at the golf club. Then I went to Renmark the next day. Looked around for evidence of the breaker, the actual breaker. Then I went to Boer in South Australia for evidence of the fictional breaker from the movie. So that'll be coming up, but we've got to finish the times and crimes of the Carbineers. Got to finish this series, and then I'll have some material that I've tucked away to give you guys if you're vaguely interested, which is what I normally add on to these episodes. So today's is a shorter story. Doesn't really involve Morant. In fact, we don't really see any more of Morant now until the court case comes up. Maybe he feels that he's been in the firing line. Maybe he's been noticed. Maybe he's got that rage out of him about the death of Hunt, and he's gone to sit back at Fort Edward with a bottle of whiskey and reflect on his actions. We don't hear from Hancock either. I'm not sure where he is. He might be feeling nervous about what's gone down. But today's story is about the death of a couple of little kids that were Boers. Interestingly, the deposition given by one of the troopers mentions the crimes that we've heard in the previous episodes, the death of the Reverend and the death of the execution of the prisoners. Which in today's episode, and indeed the one that's following this, it makes me think that a whole lot of them should have been prosecuted at that court-martial, that maybe there was something to this scapegoat business that Whitten was on about. Certainly, Morant never denied the killing of the Boer prisoners, and it seems to be going on willy-nilly now. They don't have very long to go as a detachment, as an outfit, the Carbineers. They seem to be, we're into the last month of their being in existence. So it's a sad little story, this one. I don't have any video footage for you. I will have in the next episode. It's just going to be me reading out the account of the death of these two little boys, the Groblers, and we better get on to it. It's a sunny day here. It's late April. We've had a bit of rain. So I hope you had your horses watered and fed. Hope you've had your leathers nicely polished and waxed. And your uniforms are clean and smart. And you've got your bandoliers full of ammo, because we don't know what's out there in the Spelonken. We're going to hear a bit about the Mujadjis today. We haven't heard from them lately. So we're riding out to the Spelonken. It's September 1901, and I'll see you there. Over and out. So this chapter is titled "The Grobler Boys Are Killed, Their Sister is Wounded," and it takes place on the 5th of September 1901. So that's about, let's have a look. That's about 2 weeks after the killing of the Reverend. These next couple of episodes, they don't feature Morant. He seems to have gone into his shell. He's gone into hiding, or maybe he feels like he's overstepped the mark and he's off reflecting somewhere with a bottle of whiskey. But anyway, this is what's happened. We hear our old friends, the Mujadjis, back in this episode. So a report reached Lieutenant Charles Hannam, who was commanding a small party of Carbineers at Medingen Mission Station, that a party of Boers was in the Muketsi Valley. Remember, the Medingen Mission Station is where They stopped on their way to the house where Hunter was killed. The German missionary that was favourable to the British lived at Medingen. So the Boers were close to the Mujaji's corral. That'd be where the Rain Queen dwells. So Hannum departed immediately with his patrol and located the outspanned Boers at about 5 o'clock that evening. Hannum divided the patrol into two sections, and he, together with troopers Hampton, Gibbold and two armed blacks, moved to the right and advanced to within a few hundred yards of the wagons. Corporal Ashton, troopers Maynard and Hatfield, together with 10 armed blacks, Mujajis probably, moved on to the left. Upon the signal shot from Hannum, both sections opened fire on the wagons. The Boers fled into a nearby gully, and the patrol clearly heard the screaming of women and children. Lieutenant Hannum reluctantly called a ceasefire, and the patrol advanced towards the wagons when they found one elderly Boer man. The other members of the group emerged from the gully, and the patrol discovered that one boy had been killed outright and another mortally wounded, while a young girl received a wound to the side of her neck. Two of the troopers later deposed that the Boers had not fired a shot during this action. They sought to blame Hannum for the deaths of the two boys and the wounding of the girl, as they claimed he had allowed the firing to continue after the Boers had called out that they surrendered. Well, we did hear that it was an accepted fact that there were a lot more British that should have been court-martialed besides just Morant and the Australians. Maybe this is a case of that. On arriving there, we could plainly hear women and children laughing and talking. Without asking them to surrender, Lieutenant Hannum fired the signal shot. It was an understood thing that as soon as Lieutenant Hannum fired the signal shot, we were all to fire. During the firing, that is to say, as soon as the first shot was fired, we could hear shouts of, "We surrender." Lieutenant Hannum's servant jumped up and said to Lieutenant Hannum, "The Dutchmen say they surrender, sir." He took no notice of this, but ordered troopers Gibbold and myself to continue firing. The women and children were shrieking all the time, and when we closed in on the wagon, we found one man there. Lieutenant Hannum then sent troopers Hatfield and Gibbold to take the Dutchmen to tell the other Dutchmen who were in a donga about 200 yards away to come in. I can positively swear that from the first to last, not one of the Dutchmen, neither the one in the wagon or the three in the donga, made the slightest attempt to fire a shot. The first to arrive was a woman with a dead boy in her arms between 5 and 6 years of age. Afterwards, a Dutchman came in with a boy in his arms, mortally wounded. I also saw a little girl with a wound in the side of her neck. We inspanned at once and trekked towards Blastor. I fired every shot deliberately wide of the wagon, and am absolutely certain that none of my shots took effect, as I could not bear to fire on women and children. On my left and right, one Mujaji on each side was firing, the one on my right being Jacob, Lieutenant Hannum's servant. On arrival at Blas's store, the wagons were turned over to troopers Christie and Kutsi. The children who were killed were buried at Blas's store. So the dead boys were Jan Dirk Grobler, Jr., 13, Jacobus Daniel Grobler, he was only 5, and the 9-year-old girl who was wounded was Elisabeth Maria Grobler. They were the children of the late Jan Dirk Grobler and his second wife, Aletta Sophia Grobler, from the farm Uruigrond, further down the Muketsi Valley. According to Renard, it is possible and also probable that more murders of this kind were committed which were never reported. Witten, in his book, simplifies the event by briefly describing it as follows: a child has been shot and 2 little girls slightly wounded. Other sworn depositions tell a similar story, but Trooper McInnes sarcastically describes the attack on the wagons as a glorious victory, killing 2 children and wounding another. According to Silk, we've heard a bit of him. He's given us a few accounts in these stories. According to Silk, one boy about 10 years of age was carrying his baby brother on his back out of the wagon when a rifle bullet, passed through the 2 of them, killing them both. One of the actual eyewitnesses, Trooper James Christie, we've heard from him. He reported the killing of Floris Visser, that was the wounded Boer, wrote this disturbing account, which was published in the Evening Post, a Wellington newspaper, on the 10th of April 1902. He might have been a New Zealander. So this is his account. We found Boer wagons to the south and east of us, and we presumed, as usual, that they were trekking in to surrender. We'd been some 4 or 5 days out of camp when the corporal told 8 of us that we would go out and bring in 3 wagons with 4 men with them and some women and children. We said, "Leave them alone. They're trekking up this way out of the fever country and we'll come in." "No," he says, "we're to go out. None are to be brought in." "What do you mean?" "Oh," he said, "we've got to blot this lot out." "What, shoot kids?" "Yeah, of course." "Whose orders are those?" "Never mind, that's the orders." Next day, the patrol went out, and the sequel was that 2 children were shot dead, and one 3 and another 9, and a girl of 9 was shot through the neck, and the lobe of her ear taken off. Some cows were also shot. This was done about 5 o'clock at night, and although the men and women called out that they'd surrendered, the firing still went on. And when it finally ceased, the above were the casualties. With the exception of 3 men, all the others told me before they went out that they would not fire on the women and children. They were about 200 yards or 250 yards off the wagons when they opened fire. Next day I was ordered out with a Transvaler called Kotsi to go to the Kudu River and take over the wagons from Corporal Ashton and take them to the fort. The Boers were made to inspan in the darkness and trek away in case the firing might have been noticed by some other Boers, and a dead infant and a dying one were put on board and trekked away to where I was to meet them. The second boy only lived 2 hours, and the grief of the parents was loud and pronounced. The 3 wagons now contained 4 men, 4 women, and 22 children, all of tender years, and 2 dead bodies. Father Piet Grobler asked leave to bury them. A coffin was made out of some boards laying about the store. The blacks were put on to dig the grave, and the men themselves made the coffin. I felt we were round one of the saddest sights of the war, sad because quite unnecessary. On the last day of our trek, I was some 2 hours ahead, waiting for them at noon, when I heard some news that made me sick. The 8 Boers I'd previously mentioned had all been shot by 3 officers, a non-com and 2 privates, under circumstances which led me to the conclusion that it was not a fair deal, and some foul play was at the bottom of it. They were surrendered men and had no arms, and then I thought of my own little lot coming along and the danger they were in. I decided to trek still further that night, but did not let my refugees know the reason. We halted, outspanned, and lit our evening fires, but slept not that night. I remembered how the 6 Boers who had surrendered were said to have attacked our men and had all been shot. I remembered Van Buren, one of our own men, being shot while out flanking. He was supposed to know too much. Now here were 8 blotted out, and the same old yarn that they'd gripped at rifles and fired on our men, and in a melee all were shot, no casualties on our side. And here I was coming in with another lot, and just within the firing line, as we called it. Heard too that a missionary who'd been up at the hospital with a patient had been shot dead on his return to Bandelier Kopi. He'd been present just before or immediately after the 8 men had been shot. That one of our lieutenants had left the fort after the missionary secretly was seen by the grazing guard to go in the direction the missionary had taken. That the lieutenant had returned to the fort late, etc., etc. So, Trooper Christie continues his report, and he says that one of the lieutenants, he doesn't say which one, had gone to great lengths to entice him away from his charges, the parents and other members of the Grobler group, but how he insisted on remaining with them and was determined not to abandon them. He finally managed to bring this group to the safety of the camp. Trooper James Christie could thus have been the saving grace for the rest of the Groblers. While such deeds were taking place, Witten wrote that the next day, while he was escorting these prisoners to Petersburg, the parents of the children told him that they in no way reproached Lieutenant Hannum or his men for what had happened to their children, as, according to Witten, quote, they were themselves to blame for running away from their wagons when called upon to surrender. This was the only foundation for the wicked reports as to the wholesale shooting of women and children by the Carbineers. Sounds very convenient, Lieutenant Witten. Anyway, so we do have a little photo I can show you. The two Grobler boys were buried in the little cemetery at Blas Pereira's store. He sounds like a Portuguese. Just above the confluence of the Gemsbokspruit and the Kudus River, and alongside the old transport road that led to the Salati goldfields and beyond, towards Portuguese territory. They were buried alongside the older grave dated 1892 of Thilo Osserveld. Here's a photo of that, which is covered with a large engraved slate stone slab. That's marked on the map of the Zoutpansberg. Witten claims to have escorted the wagons with the remaining Grobler family members to the concentration camp in Petersburg when Mrs. Grobler apparently made the highly improbable comment regarding the deserved death of both her sons and wounding of her daughter. It's strange that Witten, a lieutenant, had been assigned to escort that was under the command of a mere sergeant, Sergeant Edward John Must. Trooper Christie, writer of the lengthy informative letter above, states clearly that they escorted the prisoners to the safety of the camp. He doesn't explain whether this camp was the bird cage at Fort Edward or the concentration camp in Petersburg. And unfortunately, the concentration camp register, researched and reproduced by Mr. Klugel in a dissertation, does not record the incoming prisoners, only the camp deaths. So, despite knowing the approximate date they would have arrived in Petersburg, we don't know the rest of the children in the group. There were quite a few children. So that's the end of that chapter. And we don't actually know if there's any marking for the Grobler boys, headstones or anything like that. They just seem to have been buried alongside the old grave of Thilo. Yeah, that's very sad, isn't it? So we've managed to find a little bit about Lieutenant Hannum. Charles Henry Good Hannum. He was with the Queensland Mounted Infantry before transferring to the Carbineers in June of 1901. I think he was briefly charged with a court-martial, but he was acquitted, or they dropped the charges. But he was with them, his fellow brother officers, as he describes them, were Morant, Hancock, Picton and Witten, and he was with the Corps when they attacked the Filion farm when Captain Hunt was killed. As regards to Witten, Hannum gave it his opinion that something should be done. Witten, he says, was only a boy, and the quiet sort of fellow would not harm anyone. Unfortunately, he was easily led. Never struck Hannum that he'd done anything unlawful. When he heard that his trial was pending, he remarked it would be jolly bad luck if he even got cashiered. So this is what the Boer War site, the Australian Boer War site, says about Hannum. We've got a picture. It's fairly grainy and dark, but he's got that plume, probably a emu or ostrich plume in his hat. So Charles Henry Good Hannum served twice in the South African Boer War, first as a private in the 3rd Queensland Mounted Infantry and second as a lieutenant, AO 419 in the Bushveldt Carbineers. His death registration with the Queensland Births, Deaths and Marriages Registry and headstone on his grave record his name as Charles Henry Good Hannam, same as recorded with his photo in the Queenslander newspaper dated March the 1st, 1900. His second service with the Bushveldt Carbineers was significant in that it was at the same time Breaker Morant was also serving. He was interviewed by a reporter from the Sydney Morning Herald on his return to Australia on the 5th of June 1902, in which he gave account of his knowledge of officers Morant and Hancock, who were found guilty of murder for shooting unarmed Boers. While he was serving elsewhere at the time, he did not dispute the shootings occurred, but he disagreed with other characterisations levelled at particularly Morant as not what he knew well of the man. He particularly defended another junior officer, Whitten, who he did not believe should have been included in the trial, hoped he would not face the same fate as Morant. So yeah, about that book, The Scapegoats of the Empire, that Whitten wrote, the government tried to recall all the copies of it, but Hannam's sister had a copy of the book and kept it hidden, one of the very few to remain in the public sphere. It appears Charles Hannam did not return to Australia from South Africa with the rest of the 3rd Queensland Mountain Infantry, but instead transferred beforehand to take a commission with the Bushveldt Carbineers. Completion of his service, he returned to Australia with other Australian troops aboard the Oriana. So he got home on the 5th of June 1902, travel arranged by train to Brisbane the following day. It's unclear what his actual date of discharge was, after which he went on to live a quiet life in Brisbane. So he died in 1923 of epilepsy in Brisbane, and he was 46. He's buried in the South Brisbane Cemetery, Queensland. Hometown of Gympie. He went to Ipswich Grammar School, and he was born in Comet, Central Highlands of Queensland, in 1877. That's our man, Lieutenant Hannam.
Daar in Marais sal ek ooit weer kan sê, my skaat het ek weer gekry. En sonder gedaal langs die mooi rivier se wal het sy